In the ancient town of Zarephath, nestled between the bustling cities of Sidon and Tyre, lived a widow whose life had become a daily struggle for survival. The land was parched under a relentless drought, a divine judgment pronounced by the prophet Elijah upon Israel due to their rampant idolatry and waywardness. Crops had withered, water sources had vanished, and hope was a scarce commodity. This widow, with no husband to provide and a young son depending on her, found herself at the brink of despair. One day, as the sun cast its unforgiving rays upon the dusty streets, she ventured out to gather a few sticks. Her plan was simple yet heartrending: to prepare a final meager meal for herself and her son before surrendering to the inevitable fate of starvation. As she bent down to pick up the dry twigs, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Please bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink," the voice requested. Startled, she turned to see a man, his appearance marked by the weariness of travel yet exuding an undeniable presence. Obliging, she began to fetch the water when he called out again, "And please bring me a piece of bread." At this, her steps faltered. The request struck a nerve, exposing the raw reality of her situation. She faced the man and, with a voice laden with sorrow, replied, "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Her words painted a picture of utter desolation. She had reached the end of her resources and, seemingly, the end of her hope. Yet the man before her, Elijah, the prophet of the very God she referenced, responded with an unexpected directive. "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." Imagine the turmoil within her heart. To give away the little she had left, to a stranger no less, required a leap of faith that seemed beyond her capacity. Yet, something in Elijah's demeanor, perhaps the authority with which he spoke or the compassion in his eyes, stirred a glimmer of hope within her. Taking a deep breath, she chose to trust this man and, more importantly, the God he represented. She returned home, her hands trembling as she prepared the dough. The familiar act of baking, once a routine, now felt like a sacred ritual. She baked the small loaf and, with a mixture of fear and hope, presented it to Elijah. Then, she turned to make something for herself and her son. As she scooped from the jar of flour and poured from the jug of oil, her eyes widened in astonishment. The contents remained plentiful, defying logic and nature. Day after day, meal after meal, the flour and oil sustained them, just as the Lord had promised through Elijah. This miraculous provision was not just about physical sustenance. It was a testament to the boundless faithfulness of God. In a time when the widow saw only death, God introduced life. When she perceived only emptiness, God revealed abundance. Her act of obedience, though seemingly small, unlocked the storehouses of heaven. However, the journey of faith is seldom without trials. Some time later, tragedy struck. Her son fell gravely ill, and despite her efforts, he stopped breathing. Grief enveloped her, and in her anguish, she turned to Elijah, saying, "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" Her words echoed the pain of a mother who had dared to hope, only to have that hope seemingly snatched away. Elijah, moved by compassion, took the lifeless child from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. He cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried out, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him. Elijah carried the child back to his mother and said, "Look, your son is alive." Overwhelmed with gratitude and awe, she responded, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." This profound encounter underscores a timeless truth. God's provision and power are not limited by earthly circumstances, human logic, or even the finality of death. The widow of Zarephath was not an Israelite. She wasn't part of the chosen people, yet God saw her. He chose her, not just to receive a miracle, but to host a prophet, his messenger, and become a vessel through which his power would be displayed. Why? Because even in her pain, even in her poverty, she had a heart that could respond in faith. God didn't need a wealthy person. He didn't need someone with abundant resources. He just needed someone willing to say yes, even when it hurt. Someone willing to trust his word more than what her eyes could see. And isn't that where many of us are today? We look at our lives, our bank accounts, our family situations, our broken hearts, and we feel like that widow. We're gathering sticks, preparing for the worst, holding on to our last meal, unsure if we'll make it another day. Maybe it's not flour and oil for you. Maybe it's your energy, your faith, your time, your will to keep going. You feel empty, depleted. You've convinced yourself, this is it, I can't take any more. But in the middle of that scarcity, God sends a word, a whisper, a prompting, a call to obedience. He says, don't be afraid. Not because the situation isn't scary, but because fear will make you hold on to what God is asking you to release. And what you release in obedience is what he multiplies. The oil didn't multiply in a warehouse. It didn't come from a king's palace. It came from a poor widow's home, a simple jar and a willing heart. That's all God needed. That's all he still needs. Sometimes the miracle doesn't look like overflow. It looks like just enough to keep going. Just enough joy to smile today. Just enough peace to rest tonight. Just enough strength to pray one more time. Just enough oil that never runs dry. Maybe your miracle won't be loud or glamorous. Maybe it'll be the quiet faith to rise each morning, to feed your child, to speak life over a broken situation. Maybe it's the courage to give, to serve, to love, even when it feels like you have nothing left. But listen closely, he sees you. He saw the widow. He sees you too. You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. And what you have is not insignificant in his hands. The God who sustained the widow day after day is still sustaining today. The God who revived her son is still breathing life into dead situations today. He is the God of just enough, and he is the God of resurrection. Maybe you're not down to your last meal, but perhaps you're down to your last hope, your last ounce of patience, your last will to believe. This message is your Elijah moment. God is calling you to believe again, to open your hands, to take what little you have and trust him with it. Because he is not done with you. This is not the end. Your story isn't over. There is still oil in your jar, and it will not run dry. If this message stirred something in your spirit, if it reminded you that God still sees you, still has a plan, and still provides even when you feel empty, then don't keep it to yourself. Like this video. Share it with someone who's at the end of their rope. Let's remind the world that the oil will not run dry when God is involved. Comment below, what's the oil you're trusting God to sustain today? And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Rima for Purpose, where God's word meets real life, and faith comes alive through every story. Because your purpose isn't over, your oil isn't finished, and your God hasn't changed. Subscribe today. Stay filled, stay faithful, and never stop trusting him.